Hello and welcome to The Entrepreneurs on Monocle Radio, the show all about inspiring people, innovative companies and fresh ideas in global business. Coming up on today's programme, we meet the duo behind one of London's and my favourite restaurants to hear about their exciting next chapter, a new hospitality group.
The shackles have been kind of thrown away a little bit, allowing all the things that we love and care about, from hospitality to music to art to design, all these things to kind of shape and influence what we do moving forward.
And later, we'll celebrate a big milestone for the Four Seasons brand as it marks 40 years in the branded residential market.
People are gravitating towards a brand, but more importantly, they're gravitating towards experience. And so that for us, we start to now look at these markets from an experiential standpoint and also from a livability standpoint as well.
This is The Entrepreneurs, with me, Tom Edwards. You're listening to The Entrepreneurs. Lifelong friends and business partners Johnny Smith and Daniel Willis are the team behind Clove Club and Luca, a Michelin-starred modern Italian restaurant in the heart of London's Clerkenwell. Their newest venture, Smith and Willis, is a hospitality group that will build on their owner-managed and partnership restaurants, while also collaborating with designers, artists and even music production companies to drive the business forward, all while staying true to their core value that things should be built to last and crafted with care. Their latest addition is the rooms at Ozip, 4 beautifully designed bedrooms tucked above the Michelin-starred restaurant in Somerset. And for a thoughtful extra touch, guests will find the latest issue of Monocle magazine in every room and in the lounge. Johnny and Daniel stop by Midori House to discuss all these exciting developments.
This is a kind of start of a new chapter for Daniel and I as we launched Smith and Willis. So we founded Clove Club back in 2013, Luca a few years later, and now we're setting off on a new chapter of our own journey, launching Smith and Willis. So it's a new hospitality group under which Luca will live as a brand. When Daniel and I have talked about what we'd like to do in the future, we've talked about opening new hospitality venues, so new restaurants and other venues like that, but also, collaborating with other people in the industry. So we've now got a relationship with Ossip and Merlin in Somerset, which is really, really exciting. And again, at the start of that journey. And we have other exciting plans in the pipeline, which sounds really vague. And at the moment it kind of is, but there's going to be more things coming online. And, we want to have fun while we're doing it. And we want to bring great people along for the journey. I hate saying things like watch this space, but, also watch this space.
Listen, you're welcome to reveal the key strategic developments to our global audience, but I understand you might need to keep your cards a little closer to your chest. Let's just interrogate this idea of, it's interesting, you say, again, lots of kind of founders of businesses don't talk about, we want to have fun and we want people to have fun, right? But it's pretty important, especially in the hospitality game. This idea of the experience, the sort of experiential idea of how do we play with music, something you're both very passionate about. How do you play with the spaces to draw those things in? Again, when you were working in these other restaurants early in your career, explicitly or implicitly, do you think you were kind of building up a checklist of like, that's really interesting, we should push this idea further, this restaurant's great, but it lacks a such and such? Do you think you were sort of tacitly building up this ledger of things that you were going to interrogate later?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you gather experience, you think that's really great. You go to places, love that glass, love that bit of crockery. The experience of developing yourself as, hospitalitarian or so back at the flat and the supper club days where we started, then to kind of, the 10 Bells, Clove Club, then ending that journey and then starting, afresh with Smith and Willis, I think that the sort of analogy of feeling like you're at home speaks to that sort of warmth of hospitality, which I think we do well, or I hope we do well. I hope people feel that when they come to the restaurant. But I think the sort of fixtures and the fittings and the textures and the design of that place suggest celebration, conviviality. I think we always just wanted to just do things naturally, which came from our warmth of personality. And I think what's really nice is to sort of take stock at a point and go, where where have we come from and where are we going? And that sort of speaks to a wider vision. I think on the experiential side of things, one of the things I love about going to a restaurant, especially that's not mine, is that you get that whole history of that person's experience, everything that they've learned, all the places that they've previously maybe created, all the little lessons they've learned. You get that in one great big adrenaline shot of a restaurant experience. Often when people come to a restaurant when it's really exceptional and all the parts of it are singing, I think as a guest, sometimes you're like, wow, we went to an unbelievable restaurant in France, in Paris, just south of Paris, called Le Doyenné, and that was 8 years in the making. Like unbelievable, it was actually an old zoo, this farmhouse. It was stunning, and just the way that everything was done, so much of it was so subtle that really touched us. We really appreciated it. You can't imagine what's gone on over those 8 years, but you're getting it in one sort of snapshot. And so, yeah, I think with Luca, that is an element of that. That's sort of a slice of us, that everything up to that day, that when we created that restaurant was a gathering of experiences and ideas. What's beautiful, I think, about restaurants in a way that perhaps maybe other disciplines isn't, is that you get to revisit it. You come back and you're like, how can we improve it? What can we do? We're talking about doing hanging our first kind of like art in the restaurant, which will be hopefully. This can be a little reveal for you, Tom.
Exclusive, everybody. Exclusive coming up. Love it.
So Ferragosto is the kind of August bank holiday, and it's it comes from Roman times, and it's a celebration of sea, and everyone takes the day off and goes to the seaside. And we really want to kind of reflect that sort of wonderful moment in kind of food and culture and the summer in Italy. And so we did a menu last year out on the terrace. On the terrace, you can't always, it's so often booked for private hires that you can't just sit out there with a little table for two. So we block it now in the summer so you can, and whatever hires we may or may not get, we just sort of ignore, and people can just sit out there. So we do that, and we do this little menu that goes with it. And we thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to kind of take some photos? So we commissioned a photographer called Michele Jacobini, whose images you'll see through Luca socials and the website. We have this relationship with him, and last year we sent him to Sicily. He shot some really beautiful images that we were going through yesterday, and hopefully we're going to hang some of those in the restaurant. And this is quite sort of nerve-wracking for us. We're like, oh God, everyone's so loves the design of Luca. We're like, are we going to do it? Are we going to put some pictures up? I don't know.
I think that's a really good example, because it's clearly so thoughtful, and it does fit. It will fit because of what the intention behind it was, and because of the origin of. Do you see what I mean? It's not trying to sort of shoehorn something in. It sounds like a logical extension of what you were doing. Well, that's very exciting. This idea of these kind of threads that run through from Supper Club through the other venues. Talk to me a bit about. Can you articulate the threads that run through it? Can you still feel, and are you still sensitive to? These were the foundational values in that enterprise, and they were still there in the second and the third, and now with the group that run through. Can you articulate what those kind of values are, or what those threads are?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything we've done has been a reflection of our journey. You talked about the things that now influence our decisions in the restaurant and the directions you want to take. Subconsciously, over the years, you are making those observations, and they continue to inform what we do. Now, I mean, Daniel and I didn't take a traditional path in terms of hospitality or a career. We were working in restaurants since our early 20s, and it was an environment in which we really loved and in which we really thrived. And long before we came to London to open restaurants, we were bringing people together. We used to work with Daniel's cousins, Nick Fraser, on this party called the Birthday Party, where we would kind of go and find brilliant locations, sometimes a pub in Manchester, sometimes an old farmhouse in the countryside, and bring people together and create something from nothing. And this was definitely a kind of a theme that influenced things that we started to do moving forward. The idea of literally bringing people together in a room, considering music, considering food, considering energy and atmosphere, and having fun with those things. Mm. And they've definitely continued to come to life in everything that we do now. Before we started doing the Clove Club, we were doing supper clubs in our flat, and we ran a pop-up dining room above the Ten Bells pub in Spitalfields. But we weren't necessarily equipped with all the experience of how to run a business or how to be managers. We were kind of thriving on spontaneity a little bit. And, again, drawing on this theme or value of bringing people together and creating something special. It was quite naive, but in a really beautiful way.
Well, can I just ask about that? Because, again, lots of the entrepreneurs I talk to on this program say, oh, my God, yeah, my superpower was naivety. I was ignorant. If I'd known how complicated this racket was, I never would have started. Are you another pair of those almost, Daniel, sort of accidental entrepreneurs, do you think, in that way?
I think there is an element of that for sure. I mean, you look at the sort of the motivations for entrepreneurs and, there's lots of studies done, which I'm sure you're aware of, that sort of try and look at this personality type. I kind of always sort of knew I was going to have my own business. My dad had his own business. And I think there is that, one of those things that's prevalent in entrepreneurs is that often the case that their parents are, and in a way it normalizes and de-risks this idea of being able to start a business. So I think I just had this really weird and vague sense that I was not going to work for someone else. And I think as I got older and we were doing music, lots of music, and that was like the ultimate passion for us, and that was originally why we moved down to Manchester, sort of in the back of my head I was a bit like, yeah, even when I was at Bread and Wine, I was like, I'm not going to have another job after this. I kind of knew it. Now, circumstances and fate may have taken things in a different direction, and I could be, I don't know, what would I do if I wasn't doing this? Be a teacher, maybe. I love teaching people. Anyway, things worked out. The naivety aspect, I think, is definitely something that I think is a key factor in this in some capacity, because I think while we were working on music, this other thing that we were doing, which we also loved, was just sort of brewing in the background. And I think that having been so fixated on a career in music and so desperately wanting it, and just all of the energy and focus and the care and the time and the energy and just like the obsession was on that, this wonderful thing was just sort of gathering momentum. And at one point it was like, okay, well, we're going to do this then. And so that was the kind of supper clubs that Johnny spoke about, and then the 10 Bells, and that just sort of took off from there. I think there was definitely a point by which we then had to retrospectively learn some very hard lessons quick, because we hadn't, I'd never done a stock take. I'd never done a rota, really. I'd supervised a few shifts at Bread and Wine. We'd done these supper clubs. And then we opened the biggest restaurant opening of the year, arguably one of the most important restaurants in London in the last 20 years. And we were just completely ill-equipped with how to do it. And it just felt like a really bad acid trip for about 18 months of just like the stress and the anxiety was insane. And both of us felt that. And it took a lot of time to actually learn our craft. We had a real kind of, I think I genuinely think that was probably the steepest learning curve of anything in my life, those first few years at Clove Club.
But you never thought, oh my God, this is too much. Was there conviction? So you just knew, I don't know, were you confident you could weather that storm? Because I laughed, but actually, as you say, that's full on and that's intense, and you would be forgiven for saying, this is going in a direction that I can't have imagined. Yeah. Did you ever have any? I presume you had doubts, but did you ever lose the fundamental conviction?
I think running restaurants can be a really hard game. It's long hours. There's a lot of pressure. It can be also brilliantly rewarding, and it is most of the time. I'm glad to say, young people start working in restaurants.
Yeah, we love you.
But I think if you're doing it and not having success and not being carried by a wave of momentum and good times, then I can see people throwing the towel in, but we never did. And I was kind of acutely aware of, the ignorance that you talk about. And, it was uncomfortable for a lot of the time because you didn't necessarily have the answers or know what you were doing. But we were carried, like I said, by this energy and this momentum because we'd struck success. And there was an honesty to it, going back to that kind of naivety. Everything that we did was really honest. There was no pretense behind it. And I think kind of moving forward, the challenge is to maintain that honesty, because I think guests are very perceptive in that sense. They don't like smoke and mirrors. And that doesn't mean that you have to design a restaurant that is very simple in its decor or its pricing or its food. You can be as elevated as you want to, but if you can be honest with people and honest yourself about what you want to do, I think definitely for us, that is going to make sure that we continue to open places which feel true.
Well, I wanted to talk a bit about collaboration. Obviously, Monocle and Luca had a recent collaboration, and you do collaborations, some of which I think are intuitive. Hopefully that one is a little bit intuitive, some shared values, etc. Some that are a bit maybe out of left field. Do you think that it's because you've got this very strong foundation where you can challenge one another, be super candid, very honest, that it's easier for you to strike up collaborations because you don't worry about, is this institution going to get it?
I think what's great about this next chapter with Smith and Willis, I think, is looking to that future and plotting our own course and deciding what we want to do, who we want to work with. Sort of unwittingly in creating Luca, we created this brand and this space that people like you and other people wanted to come to, that we have shared aesthetics and interests with. And I think that previously, perhaps these people coming to our restaurant and we maybe didn't think about how we could work with them or things that we could do together. And that's been really fulfilling. And the Monocle thing was so nice because it was just like we'd come in and like people coming into the space in the morning and it bred life into the building and no phones. And we're quite militant with it, telling people this is a reading room. And often I think people can view these things as, or it can be viewed as a sort of vacuous marketing exercise. And I think ultimately we're doing things because we want to do them. And I think that's what we want to do over the next 40 years is like do things that's really meaningful and important to us with people who we admire, trust and respect.
Let's just throw the sort of the picture forwards a little bit. Johnny, tell me a little bit about, and again, I know you probably can't reveal, as you said, too many of your strategic decisions from down the track, but I can ask you what you're most excited about in this next era, and you can use whichever time horizon you like, as long as you want. What are you most excited about?
Okay, I think this feels like a really exciting time in life. You know, we're over the hump of turning 40 now. And with that has actually come a kind of, a bit of a sense of really settling into life, quite honestly. And I think that's coincided with this new chapter for us. And being in a place where we feel like we're the masters of our own destiny to an extent. There's just Daniel and I now as business partners. And that can, that presents challenges, but it also presents excitement and opportunity. So I feel like the shackles have been kind of thrown away a little bit. And to points we discussed earlier, allowing all the things that we love and care about, from hospitality to music to art to people to design, all these things to kind of shape and influence what we do moving forward. As a younger man in hospitality, I wanted to know the answers to everything, and in life generally, actually. I wanted to know the answers. I wanted certainty. I wanted everything in a bit of a neat little box. And now I feel like we're both more willing to go on and enjoy the journey of creation. When we opened Clove Club, our only experience was doing house parties in our flat, really. Parties in barns in the northwest of England. Just wacky fun things that we've done.
I should say to our listeners, a sort of a wry smile plays over your face when you saw. There must be some amazing anecdotes, but you can hear Daniel chuckling away.
Exactly.
I don't know what story you're thinking of, Daniel, but I kind of want to hear that one. Maybe it's not one for on air. I don't know.
It was all kind of unconventional, okay. And I guess it's like I wouldn't describe us as rule breakers, but I think moving forward we can kind of do what we want to do. As obviously commercially viably, it has to work. Businesses need to make money for them to continue to exist and to thrive. But it's just nice to be in that place where we can consider everything and put it on the table. We don't need to be constrained by a certain set of rules and parameters of what a restaurant should look like or what a bar should look like or when we should do this or who we should collaborate with. So that's a kind of really fun state of mind to be in.
I love that. It's a real good sort of mantra. Let me do a final sort of quick fire thought. We talked a bit about collaboration. You keep talking about music and art and design and all of these things and the fusion and the interesting thing that happens at that meeting point. What's a dream collab? And this can be like those, who would you have at a dinner party, alive or dead? You can go back through the mists of time. Maybe like, I don't know, who's in charge of the records? Who's talking? Like, what would it be? Give us a couple of people. And it could be like a potential one that you may actually be able to do, or you can delve back into history. Or they can be foodie, they can be music, whatever you like. Give us a couple of thoughts.
We've already hosted, we had a dinner party on the terrace maybe last year to celebrate white truffle season, which of course needs celebrating. And Nigella Lawson was one of the guests who was extremely charming and convivial and very wonderful. So she would definitely be invited back. And I think I'd love to have the late, great Keith Floyd, he's going to stir things and mix things up in a wonderful way. And also, somebody playing records, probably the late, great Andrew Weatherall. he actually curated an amazing playlist for us when we were doing the supper clubs in our flat, one of the supper clubs. And he hand delivered it in a little jiffy bag with all the, a jiffy envelope, excuse me, with all the names of the tracks on the playlist scribbled in pen. And at the top it said, no Googles or downloads. So basically he he had this encyclopedic knowledge of music, and he had taken all of the vinyls, each track of each song had, was related to music, and had recorded it onto a CD for us. So we've now got that framed in the loft as a little memento to him. So yeah, I think those two would contribute to a very good evening.
That was Johnny Smith and Daniel Willis, the co-founders of Smith and Willis. You can find out more about the developments at OSIP by heading to osiprestaurant.com, or you can head for more about the group to smithandwillis.london. You're listening to The Entrepreneurs. The branded residence market is booming. It's set to double in size over the next 7 years. One name that's been ahead of the curve is the Four Seasons. This year they're marking 40 years since launching their first branded residence in Boston. By the end of the year, they'll be operating 60 residential properties across more than 20 countries. So what draws people to these homes, and where will the next ones appear? To find out, Monocle Radio's Fernando Augusto Pacheco sat down with Chris Meredith, Group Head of Residential at Four Seasons. Chris began by explaining to Faye how the brand was among the first to spot the opportunity.
Boston was the first project that we did that had residential in it. And then here we are today with, by the end of this year, we'll have 60 properties open globally across 22 countries and nearly 6,000 units. So it's gone from a slow crawl to a very fast pace. And I think if you look at our pipeline moving forward, even the next 5 years, we've got another 35 projects that'll be open. Our business effectively will double in the course of the next 5 to 6 years. So what that's telling us is the market's resonating with it. And I think we're finding some great projects and great partners that allow us to kind of be able to flourish in this space.
And that's remarkable. And even your title as Group Head of Residential, you're the first one to have this title as well. So I guess
I am.
So you're becoming important. I mean, so this is this is a sector that Four Seasons is really, really paying attention more and more, even after 40 years.
It is. And listen, I'm very fortunate to take on this role. And listen, I look at it as a steward of this role. I mean, there'll be somebody after me, and fortunately, I'm hopefully the first one to set the groundwork here. But for Four Seasons, it's very important. If you look at the growth of our business as a whole, not just in residential, over 65% of every project we look at and agree to do has some form of residential attached to it. A lot of that comes down to the financial economics of deals, and not that we need to get into that, but I think the business as a whole, we've really looked at the residential side of it and realized that we've got to pay much greater attention to it. We do a phenomenal job at the service aspect. I mean, it's what Four Seasons is known for. But now we really have to dive deep with our development partners and start to understand what makes them tick and what makes them think, and how do we kind of align ourselves with best in class. So it's been exciting for me because it really exposes me to multiple markets across multiple regions. And, you've got to get educated quickly. But more importantly, we've got a great team that's spread across the globe that really helps me get there. So it's been a great first year, and hopefully there's many more to come.
Well, and let's talk about how global it is. I looked at your portfolio. You're present, in basically all regions in the world, with a special focus on North America. Is there any area, particular region or a country that Four Seasons is really looking at and saying, we should invest more here and open more properties in this market?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're right. If you looked at our business over the last 30 years, it's heavily North American dominated. If you really look at it in the last 5 and moving forward the next 5, that is starting to even out. We're seeing a huge amount of growth, certainly in the Middle East and the Gulf states. Europe as well is also becoming a really strong focus for us. Where I'd like to see us really push into, though, is I still think from an Asia perspective and an Africa perspective. I think there's a lot of great opportunity there. You've got some great emerging economies. You've certainly got a lot of affluence there that understands it, and especially in Asia, which is such a service culture in itself. I still see there's a lot of effort for us to be put into those regions. Yeah, I think the Americas and EMEA, Europe and Middle East, will start to take care of itself. And again, we've got a lot of great exposure there. But for me, I'm really trying to push into Asia Pacific and Africa as 2 identifiable markets.
And Chris, just remind us about the numbers from all the Four Seasons hotels and resorts. What's the percentage of them that also have the residency aspect to it? I know it's not all of them, but it's quite a large number of them.
Yeah, so as a business, so as a company, we have 133 hotels open and operating today. And then, as I said, we have 57 residential properties open today, with another 35 opening in the next kind of 4 to 5 years. So really, we're kind of 1/3 of the business, give or take, right now, a little greater than that. But you'll start to see as we get to 2030, it becomes about 50% of the business of where hotels are open and where residential is. And then the other thing to note is we've got a huge emphasis on standalone residential, so not attached to a hotel. That for us is where we see the greatest amount of growth. If you look at just the development sector in general, there's a much greater audience in residential than there is in hospitality. And part of that is to be a hotel developer, it takes a lot of work and it's very difficult to finance. I'm not saying that a residential development is easy to do, but we see a much greater audience in the residential sector. So when I talk about the growth, it doesn't mean that they're also attached to a hotel. There's a lot of that growth is fixated on the standalone residential piece.
I was going to ask, what is your customer looking for? You know, I can think of course, beautiful design, a sense of safety, but I want to hear it from you.
Sure. And listen, it's ever evolving because the age bracket, or certainly the buyer profile bracket, is changing every year. You know, this used to be a baby boomer type asset that they acquired. Now you're seeing Gen X, you're seeing millennials come in. So all of those different generations want different things. And so we have to try and work out, how do you design to the masses? And when I talk about the masses within that affluent sector. And so what we see is we see a heavy emphasis on wellness. I think everybody understands the longer we can live and the better we can live, the better it may be. And so we've done a full audit on all of our properties to see where people access spaces. You know, it's quite often we used to see people building these big wine cellars and big theaters and whatnot. And they're great and they're phenomenal and they do get used. But our two most popular used assets within a building is the gym and wellness and meeting space. And I think what's happened post-COVID as well is people realize not only can they work from home, but at this sector of affluence, typically people will come to you. So we want to create these incredible meeting spaces where people can, you know, operate within the building they live in. The wellness piece for us here is immense, and we're really trying to get smarter with it. You know, we're agnostic in terms of who we operate with when it comes to a spa and wellness standpoint. So really, we work hard with our architectural partners to make sure the wellness piece is first and foremost.
And one question, if I may, you're based, I believe, in Miami. In the US, of course, which is a massive market for Four Seasons and many other companies as well. Is there any part of the US where you're looking at? I mean, because where you are, Miami, I mean, it's incredible. It's a city that is booming. A lot of people are moving there. There's a big Latin American community. So it's quite an interesting one. So from the US perspective, what can you tell us about the branded residential sector there?
Sure. So, I mean, Miami's, ground zero. Miami and Dubai, I think, are the two. If you looked across the globe, they're those two markets where you think, all right, there's every single brand imaginable inside of those markets. And it's great. I think it's really attracted a strong international market and also a domestic market. We saw a lot of buyers move down from New York during the pandemic era, and they've stayed down here. And I think they've realized, not only is there some tax benefits, but there's also just a lifestyle benefit of being down here. So Miami for us is great, and we've got a phenomenal partner in Ford Partners who really dominates for us in the South Florida market. We have Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, and other projects with them. But when we start to look across the Americas, where we're really trying to focus on is with the standalone residential product. We believe there's about 20 strong markets throughout the US where you have this pocket of affluence that wants to live this lifestyle of really a service culture. And so, from the West Coast all the way across to the East, we're really doing a deep dive into each of these individual markets and trying to find those affluent pockets where we can find not only a great development partner, but a great opportunity. We are trying to get a greater influence on the West Coast of the US. We don't have a big presence there. We have a phenomenal standalone residential project in LA, which recently sold out. We have a project up in San Francisco and also up in Seattle. But we're trying to get a little deeper into the West Coast market as well. And we were fortunate enough to sign a deal recently in Park City, Deer Valley, which is an alpine project for us, where the market has just received that incredibly well. Nearly 300 million in sales in the first quarter of this year, which would make it our top performing project from a sales perspective. So it really kind of told us a lot that people are gravitating towards a brand, but more importantly, they're gravitating towards experience. And so that for us, we start to now look at these markets from an experiential standpoint and also from a livability standpoint as well.
Another region worth of note for Four Seasons is the Middle East. And you mentioned Dubai there as well. Another region of incredible growth. And I can see the relation you mentioned with Miami, because people want to move there. It is attractive for people from other countries or the nearby region as well to move.
It is. And we were very fortunate. We did Dubai Water Canal, which is a standalone residential project a couple of years back. Incredibly well received by the market. It sold out relatively quickly. But more importantly, what we've seen is some of those resales have really elevated the pricing there. And we've got a phenomenal partner there in Brightstar, which they're also now doing Dubai DIFC for us. They're an exceptional partner. And I think because of the quality of what they did at Water Canal, people get to see that. It's tangible for them. Yeah, a lot of the projects we do, you have to buy off plan. We don't have to buy off plan, but you have the option to buy off plan. And for some, that works. For others, they want to see more tangibility to it. And when we've already got an existing asset within a market, it's always a great showcase for us, especially when they're performed at that sort of execution elegance. Yeah, we get to point them there to show them what that looks and feels like, which is why we've just seen such robust sales at DIFC. And even in the region in general, we have another residential project in Abu Dhabi. We recently signed one in Ras Al Khaimah. Yeah, we see the whole UAE in particular as a really strong target market for us. And more importantly, we've also got a strategic corporate office there as well. So we've got great resources on the ground that understand that market really intensely. But it's been a great success for us. And more importantly, we think there's just more growth within the Middle East market in general. Obviously, Saudi for us is a core focus along with a lot of other brands, and we think that's going to do exceptionally well. And so we continue to put a lot of emphasis on those regions, and more importantly, from a resource perspective, but also from a standalone residential perspective.
That was Chris Meredith, Group Head of Residential for Four Seasons, and you can find out more by heading over to fourseasons.com. And that is all for this episode of The Entrepreneurs. We'll be back at the same time next week. The programme's produced by Laura Kramer with audio editing by Jack Dewars. You can listen again and find out more about the programme at monocle.com or follow us and browse the archive wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to contact the team, do email Laura on lrk@monocle.com. I'm Tom Edwards. Goodbye and thanks for listening to The Entrepreneurs.